Chapter 8, Our House. Welcome to your new home, Jenkins said dryly, handing Joe a mobile phone. Every PM gets a prime ministerial phone. It has all the latest technology, camera and recording facilities. This house is the beating heart of Britain. Every decision about the country for the last few hundred years all comes from here. There was a hum to the place and the sound of people talking and tapping fingers on the keyboards. It felt busy, as though behind every corner there was something hugely important and secretive going on. The whole place had a strange, not feel exactly, more like a smell. It lingered in the nose and stuck to the back of the throat. What was it? Joe sniffed loudly. What's that smell? He asked me. Don't look at me, AJ said innocently. For once it wasn't AJ, it was something else. Joe shook his head, puzzled, carried on, following Jenkins. Oh, look, they've got a downstairs lav, Joe's mum said rather too loudly for Joe's liking. Actually, we have 38, Jenkins said. Blimey, told you it'd be posh, said Mum. Joe stopped in his tracks in awe of the sight before him. They were standing at the foot of a giant staircase which twisted up to the top of the house. There were photographs all the way up the wall. Joe liked how they started in black and white and moved into colour the higher he looked. Whoa, that's all the Prime Ministers there have ever been, right? AJ asked, impressed. Will I get my picture put up there too? Joe breathed. Of course, Prime Minister. The first time anyone had actually called him Prime Minister, Joe felt a mixture of excitement and nerves swirl round his belly. And now for the tour. Jenkins had clearly given this speech once or twice before. 10 Downing Street has been home of the Prime Minister since 1732. It contains roughly 100 rooms, give or take a room cupboard or two. It was a job for Joe, Mum and AJ to keep up as Jenkins strode down the main corridor, highlighting various points of interest. The rooms were huge, the biggest Joe had ever seen, and suddenly Joe felt very small indeed. Joe and AJ noticed something else too. People were poking their heads out of rooms and round walls to stare at them. I feel like we're in a zoo, AJ whispered. I know, I don't know whether to wave or growl, said Joe. It's him, Joe heard on more than one occasion. Who are all these people? Joe asked Jenkins. These are your staff, Prime Minister, Jenkins replied. They're here to help and advise you. Running a country is a huge undertaking, and one person can't do it on their own. For instance, sir, Jenkins stopped and the top of his voice barked. What's the value of the American dollar against the pound? From nowhere, a head popped round a door. 1.6018. Ooh, can I try? Joe asked eagerly. I don't see why not, Jenkins said wearily. How long's a piece of string? Joe yelled at the top of his voice. An average of 1.574 metres long, a voice called from upstairs. What's the most popular flavour of milkshake? AJ joined in. Strawberry, came the far-off answer, but personally I like chocolate. They're good, aren't they? Joe was astonished. They're the best, Prime Minister, Jenkins answered. Shall we move on? Jenkins pushed open another door to a huge room with a big table in the centre. This is the cabinet room, Jenkins announced. The most important room in the whole house. This is where you'll make all your biggest decisions. Like saving the park? Joe asked. Indeed, Jenkins replied. Joe twitched his nose again. He could still smell the smell. What on earth was it? And it was beginning to drive him mad. There's also a private garden that only you have access to, as well as living quarters. The house comes complete with 300 members of staff, including butlers and cooks. I don't know what to say. You could fit a roller coaster in there, said Joe, staring out into the garden. I'll take it. Normally, a Prime Minister likes to decorate several rooms in his or her own taste. Would that be of interest to you, Prime Minister? Jenkins asked. Joe looked at AJ looked at Joe, and their eyes sparkled with delight. An hour later, Jenkins was standing next to a huge flip chart showing plans of each and every room. His ankles were buried under scrunched up pieces of paper. Sweat rolled down his face. Are we finally all agreed? You want a fast food bar complete with an arcade, a laser quest in the basement, a jelly room for any, quote, jelly emergencies, end quote, a movie room along with a chalk ice cellar on standby all times, a fireman's pole. I can ask about the shark tank, but I have a feeling health and safety will say no. You want a room set aside for every new toy that's invented, and you want me to ask about a theme park in the back garden. Joe and AJ looked at each other and replied together, yes. Leave it with me, PM. Now you should really think about going to your office and taking some calls. It's traditional for world leaders to phone you and congratulate you on being the Prime Minister, so they should be calling any second. How long will it take? Well, there are over 200 of them, so 5 hours should cover it, came a voice from down the corridor, round the corner and up the stairs. 200? 5 hours? I'm sorry, sir, it is usual, Jenkins replied. I've got a better idea, Joe said in his best plotting voice. Hello, Prime Minister, my name is Jim James. Jim James III, President of the United States. I'm just ringing to congratulate you on your victory. Hello, Mr. President, sir. I'm afraid the Prime Minister can't come to the phone as he has a spot of maths homework to finish off. This is his mother. Joe gave her a big thumbs up. Oh, well, it's nice to meet you, ma'am, the President replied. What's the weather like where you are? It's a bit parky out here today. Parky? The weather's fine here, ma'am. Oh, call me Doreen. Tell me, where's some good places to visit in America? I fancy going out there for my 50th next year. I want to go shopping in New York like on the films. Tell me, do you have an M&S over there? Mum put her hand over the receiver, grinned and nodded. It's nice to have a sit down and chat, isn't it? Only another 167 to go, Joe said. Ooh, you better put the kettle on. Joe chuckled and closed the door on his mum. Settling in, Prime Minister? Joe turned around to see Violetta stalking towards him, AJ and Jenkins. Joe decided that he was going to be very pleasant indeed. He gave her a warm grin and stretched his hand out. No hard feelings, he said to Violetta. Of course not. I'm sure your time here will be very memorable, she said, trying to smile again, in the same way that falling off a cliff or having your arm chewed off by a rat is memorable. Joe withdrew his arm fast. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you think that grown-ups were supposed to be nice to children? How terribly bad of me to disappoint you. The thing is, this isn't a game. This is real, and you'll find out that grown-ups don't play fair at all. Joe stared at her. He was determined to keep his composure. We'll see who wins in the end, he said, managing a smile that was almost genuine. That smell, the one that's been bothering you since you walked through the door. That, my boy, is the smell of power, and it belongs to me, so don't get used to it. Violetta turned on her heel and stormed off. Don't worry, Joe, you're PM now. That pretty much means you can do anything you like. You could probably have her exterminated or turned into sausages or something. Right, Jenkins? AJ said, winking. Definitely not, Jenkins exclaimed. Oh, right, I get it. Definitely not, AJ said, doing air of quotes with his hands and winking and nodding at Jenkins. Stop winking at me. You can't have anyone killed and turned into sausages. No, I totally get it, man, AJ said, tapping his nose. Will you stop that? Stop what? Winking and tapping your nose. Jenkins pinched the bridge of his nose with his fingers and sighed. It's been a long day. I suggest you retire for the night. Tomorrow is your first cabinet meeting, so I would advise that you get some sleep. I took the liberty of speaking to AJ's mother earlier, and she is happy for him to stay over if that suits both of you. AJ and Joe looked at each other. Sleepover! They both yelled together and went for a high five. Sadly, Joe missed and caught AJ on the nose.